morning. I can't really say how pleased I am to welcome you all here. It's an absolute pleasure to host this event. And as my colleague said, my name is David Fitzpatrick, and as President of TU Dublin, it is a really important day for us in terms of the Convene programme and the Convene Enterprise Forum. So we're really pleased to be able to launch the Convene Enterprise Forum today with such a distinguished set of panellists, and in particular, the Taoiseach is joining us. And really thank you for giving us your time today, Taoiseach. Very much appreciated. I suppose, as was alluded to just now, given the experience that we've all shared over the past 20 months, this might be the first time that we've actually been able to attend an event like this in some time. And perhaps that's another cause for being in a positive and happy mood, and the opportunity to see people not quite face to face, but at least eye to eye, I think is something that we all benefit from. The last 20 months have been challenging in many different ways. I'd also like to note the fact that this is the first time we've been able to host a major event, an external event, and panellists and so on that's core to the university business here in the Central Quad, our newest facilities on Grangegorman campus. As you can see, they're already back in use. Students arrived back from the 20th of September, and our teaching semester is fully geared up. But being able to host events and to engage with enterprise and industry is a core part of our mission, and this is the first such event we've been able to. I think a key part of our Convene Enterprise Forum is the fact that it brings together enterprise and industry and academia. And today, I think our panellists are going to talk around the topic of strengthening the partnership between higher education and enterprise for a post-pandemic Ireland. Very topical and very interesting for us. We're also very fortunate to have this panel discussion expertly moderated by Eileen Dunne, who also will take part in the fireside conversation with the Taoiseach, Micheál. So although today's event is being hosted by TU Dublin, I think it's very important to note that the Convene programme is a partnership between UCD and TU Dublin, two of Ireland's two largest universities coming together to really help drive this agenda forwards. So as such, this isn't a TU Dublin event, this is a Convene event, and I as President am very happy to host it and have an event that focuses on the need to transform the relationship between industry and academia. So specifically, Convene is a partnership between TU Dublin and UCD's Innovation Academy. It will work with enterprise partners across representative bodies from 7 major sectors of business, including tourism, food and drink, creativity and cultural, social enterprise, ICT, fintech, medtech and pharma, and will draw on both leading national and international companies. Through a genuine partnership and collaboration between higher education and enterprise, Convene will create programmes that will deliver priority skills and innovation that are necessary to reinvigorate business and to fast-track resilient and sustained economic recovery as we move forward from the unprecedented disruption that has taken place through COVID-19. A core part of the Convene funding is to enable the Enterprise Forum model, which, as I said, brings together academia, people at the coalface in industry, policy experts, government leaders and other stakeholders for regular panel discussions on issues relating to the future of enterprise and how higher education can play its part in shaping the post-COVID recovery. I'm hoping and planning that we will build on the success of today's event and anticipate that future Convene Forum events will concentrate on the importance of issues such as climate action, transversal skills, global Ireland, and alternative talent development strategies. I certainly look forward to welcoming you to future events again, but for the meantime, once again, you're all most welcome to today's launch of the Convene Enterprise Forum. It's a pleasure now to introduce Dr. Deirdre Lillis, who's the Convene lead for TU Dublin, and will introduce Convene further and also introduce us to the rest of the session. Deirdre, over to you.
Míle buíochas Uachtaráin, Macóride. I'm going to start by asking to stop just for one moment and maybe think about a goal you've set for your enterprise over the next 5-10 years and put a pin in that for now. Once upon a time, researchers from what was then DIT Kevin Street helped proved the damaging effects of smoking in the workplace. The then Minister for Health, Micheál Martin, navigated new legislation through a sea of powerful vested interests, which resulted in a ban on smoking in the workplace in Ireland and led to similar bans in almost all countries worldwide. Sprinkle on the magic dust of ambition, Kevin Street has become TU Dublin, and this magnificent central quad, the Minister for Health, has become the Taoiseach. So keep a pin in that goal of yours. The dictionary definition of convene is to come together for a purpose. So what is our purpose? We have a pivotal opportunity right now to capture what we've learned from the pandemic to help Ireland rebuild for sustainability and resilience. Convene is transforming how universities and enterprise work together, and it's fundamentally about building partnerships for purpose. We're differentiated by our focus on what enterprise actually needs, not on what we as universities want to do. We're very good at that ourselves. We're explicitly leveraging enterprise's own capacity for talent development and innovation. We're breaking down traditional silos and creating a Velcro interface between academia and enterprise, where lots and lots of small, frequent interactions build strong, inclusive and enduring partnerships. As Gaeilge, convene loosely translates as córa, which is a tradition of a community response when problems were bigger than one individual or one family could solve. So let's revisit that goal you've set for yourself. You're all transformational leaders. I've no doubt that that goal is a worthy one. My question is, what happens to that goal if even the most benign of climate predictions comes to pass? What happens if we're reconvening here in 2030 and looking back on the good old days of COVID-19? For me, it's simple. If we don't take meaningful action on climate, every goal we have just set for ourselves in this room today has become exponentially more difficult to achieve. And it's hard because, like COVID, it's asking us to do things differently or not at all. But it can be done, and we've been here before, and the smoking ban is an example. Sprinkle on some more magic dust of ambition. In September, the Taoiseach used Ireland's presidency of the UN Security Council to reframe climate change as a threat to global security. As they did for COVID, I have no doubt the Irish government, Irish universities and enterprise will respond. The Convene Enterprise Forum will play its part by bringing Ireland's transformational leaders together in a safe space to have those tough, soul-searching and necessary conversations in the months and years ahead. Tá gansaí speisialta a cafa agam inó, gansaí fola agus bindalán, agus is mór an ordum, cuira huirt an Taoiseach Micheál Martin. I'm honoured to invite the Taoiseach Micheál Martin to open our first Convene Enterprise Forum. Míle buíochas.
Uachtarán na hallscoile David agus Cathaoirligh na hallscoile David a Ríist agus Deirdre dúspáir a bána ba fairmhuichas a gháil don chláiste socht an cure chuig an ócáid táchtach agus starúlann seo anmh cogádagus a dhéanamh le gach éine bhí agus atá freigrach as an tugra seo agus ní léon áras orm ach go méid tionach ar file, deithionach ar file ag an ionad seo chórsaí na tíre seo sna blianta atá roing. I'm absolutely delighted to be joining you here on site at the new TU Dublin Grangegorman campus, which is a fantastic facility that will play a central role in our nation's education for generations to come. I was here some weeks ago, time moves fast, when you're Taoiseach, with the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who was completely blown away by the facilities here and her interaction with the students, one of whom David was saying to me was a German student, wasn't arranged or pre-arranged, just naturally, which illustrates the European global dimension of a modern Irish campus today, and it's a wonderful thing which we should continue to celebrate. And I got a real buzz coming through the campus on the way in here just to meet students, pharmacy technicians, met some students doing chemical analytics or analytical chemistry, sorry. I was on the humanities side. But I remember I said to the young student, I said I was told 10 years ago when I was in Enterprise that there's a worldwide shortage of analytical chemists. You know, one of the most valuable commodities around. It's all ahead of you and so on. But it's just fantastic to get the buzz. And so I'm delighted to be here, Deirdre, I can tell you, and to be with you because this has been a long journey for Grangegorman. 10,000 students now on campus. It's been a long one. But I think it is, to be fair, it's a persistent vision of what this could be, is one that successive governments, including those that I served on myself in the past, have all been fully behind. I remember the first memo that came to a government, which was conceptual at the time in terms of what could happen here. And I'm very pleased, absolutely over the moon to be here as Taoiseach to celebrate this latest iteration of the sort of vision, ambition and creative thinking that has brought Grangegorman to this point. But before I talk about Convene and the Enterprise Forum that I'm here to officially launch, I want to say a word about the last 18 months. The story of COVID-19 has been one of terrible loss and great disruption, but it's also been one of resilience, solidarity and courage. I know at first hand how difficult the COVID journey has been for the entire higher education sector. I just want to pay tribute this morning to all of you and to all of the staff and students who work so hard to keep services running through all the twists and turns of this journey. And we discussed this on the way in with David in terms of the disruptive impact of COVID on student life. We've all been through that campus experience. It's something that's precious, and a lot of sacrifice has been a factor in both students and staff. But the way in which the staff, the management, trade unions, students changed work practices and teaching and learning methods to continue to deliver a high-quality education has been a really important part of our great national effort to come through this pandemic. And I want to thank you for that. I look around this morning and I see many faces that I do recognise. I see people who've spent a lifetime in education, and I know they will have heard me speaking on this theme many times. But at the real core of my political philosophy is a deep belief that education is the keystone of our nation's success. It is the foundation upon which all our social and economic progress has been built. It is the great enabler of our citizens, and it has transformed us as a people. It has informed my approach throughout my career, and it is why I was so focused on establishing a new Department of Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science when we were agreeing the programme for government. It is why research is at the heart of the agenda of the Shared Island Unit that I've established in the Department of Taoiseach, and it's why the National Development Plan, published just a few days ago, mandates substantial and strategic investment in education from primary level right through to advanced research and innovation. And it is the reason why I was so pleased to be part of this morning's event. Obviously, much of our time in government over the last 18 months has been spent on protecting public health, working to sustain the economy through all of the necessary restrictions, and then managing the national vaccination programme and our route out of those restrictions. However, throughout that process, we were also very focused on preparing for a post-COVID world. We wanted to ensure that when our society and economy were able to function properly again, that we were ready for smart and sustainable growth. And that's one of the reasons why last October we brought forward the Human Capital Initiative Pillar 3, supported by a very significant budget of €197 million over the next 5 years. As you will all know, the central purpose of HCI funding is to strengthen and deepen the critical interface between enterprise, education and research. And the particular focus of Pillar 3 is to support projects that encourage innovation and agility in our institutions and our graduates. What we want to do is to make a significant positive impact on enterprise-focused courses with pioneering methods of teaching and delivery. We want to facilitate ever more engaging ways of learning and by so doing provide lifelong learning and upskilling opportunities. We want to future-proof graduates and ensure that there is a greater focus across the whole spectrum of higher education course provision on promoting and embedding transversal skills. And we want to align our funding with national strategic objectives for the higher education system and the future skill needs of our society and our economy. The 22 successful projects announced by my colleague Minister Simon Harris last October met all of these objectives, and Convene, led by TU Dublin and UCD, was one of the largest, attracting funding of just over 17.5 million for the period 2020 to 2024. It is a genuinely innovative project, supported by a large number of long-standing enterprise partners, and I commend all of you for this collaborative effort. Uniquely in Irish higher education, it is organised around 7 major economic sectors: ICT, FinTech, tourism, food and drink, creative and cultural, social enterprise, medtech and pharma. It can, I believe, play an important role in helping to rebuild our society and economy differently, to fully embrace the digital age and take urgent action in response to our climate and biodiversity crisis. Importantly, in this, it is closely aligned with the priorities of our post-COVID recovery. The Convene Enterprise Forum is a shared space to bring enterprise and academia together and speaks to the essence of what we're trying to do with this Pillar 3 funding. Projects like this, working at the nexus of enterprise, education and research, can be a game changer for our national progress. Going forward, we need ever more and ever deeper collaboration between enterprise and higher education. And I would be very hopeful that the Convene model is very replicable and applicable to other higher education institutions, albeit with different regional contexts. Indeed, a lot of the work that TU Dublin and UCD are doing in terms of innovation and enterprise individually, as well as through Convene, represents a very strong model for the rest of the sector all across the country. I have no doubt that the Convene initiative will only continue to build on the strong start that it has enjoyed. And I want you to be reassured that the government I lead is steadfast in our support of your sector and your mission, and I look forward to following your achievements. I'm also very much looking forward to developing some of these themes now in conversation with Eileen. And so without further ado, I want to thank you again for your work. I want to wish Deirdre and the team every success with Convene. Well,
good morning, everybody, and I'm delighted to be here too, and welcome back, Taoiseach. How was Slovenia?
It was fine. Actually, it poured rain. And I was trying to make it easy for the Prime Minister of Slovenia. I said, this is like home from home. But actually, we haven't had rain like they had in Slovenia yesterday for a long time. So, but it's a beautiful country. And it just to take up the cue from Deirdre, the big issue was energy. Even though we were discussing the Western Balkans and accession to the European Union, it was intruded by energy and the crisis in energy.
And where do you stand on that? Some of the countries are pushing for a coordinated European response, a coordinated EU response.
Yeah, I think what's happened with the success of the vaccination, the pre-purchase, the lead role of the Commission, other leaders are saying, look, maybe the Commission can do more. That's a bit more, I think, to say, for example, would the European Commission in time be entering into purchase agreements on behalf of the entire European Union in respect of energy and gas and so on? That's where some people are already talking about. I think that is some distance, but I would be supportive of a pan-European approach within the European Union on the energy question. It's a reminder of the fragility of our trajectory. What do I mean by that? I mean, there's a danger here that not just in the increase in pricing, but in worries about supply lines and so on, that people will move to undermine maybe the decarbonisation agenda. That's something I'm very conscious of. Some member states may come and say, you've got this wrong, you can't get your targets. And so that's a real danger. So there has to be a degree of, we've got to watch that space politically, that we don't allow this crisis to derail the medium and longer term imperative, the immediate imperative of meeting our climate change targets and objectives. There's a lot of naysayers out there and people who have a different perspective.
Well, even here, Sinn Féin are already calling for you not to proceed with raising the carbon tax in the budget.
Yes, and that's why we legislated last year to make that an annual event. So it would need a change in primary legislation in anticipation that there would be rough periods like this, politically rough periods, where the easy thing to do would be to do that. But if we don't build up a fund that enables us to retrofit, that enables us to have environmental friendly farming, or to fuel poverty agenda, because we do need, part of the carbon taxation is to protect those in the lowest incomes at moments like this. I think the challenge for us in the budget is to intervene in a manner that protects low-income families and meets this particular moment, if you like, where prices are going up. But I'm in no doubt that if we don't have a carbon tax, the carbon tax in itself is internationally researched as one effective tool to wean people off carbon, but more importantly than that, it will give us resources to do the kind of things we need to do in changing society and changing practices and so on. Because there's not an endless money tree out there, and there's not a painless way to doing all of this.
We'll come back to some of those budgetary matters, but let's talk about Convene for a moment. Deirdre talked about you as Minister for Health and how far things have come for you, but go back even further, and you started out life as a teacher, and you said yourself education has always been very important to you. You see it as the great enabler. So what does the launch of something like this mean to you, and what do you think it can achieve?
I think, from my generation, we were part of the Dunne revolution, where we got access to second-level education. We would have been the first generation in our family that got second-level education because our parents had to leave a primary. Their passion in life was education. So they probably imbued that in us. Move fast forward, when I became a Minister for Enterprise, that was a very important period in my life as well, because you kind of opens up to a different world. I remember meeting, when I was Minister for Enterprise Ireland, Frank Ryan was the CEO, a very good CEO, and he's now involved in the IDA. But his key point was we had to build the R&D base in Irish small to medium-sized companies. We had to try and dramatically increase that. And the future for Ireland was to bring solutions to the world market, solutions that are research-based, and that solve problems for people. That's where Convene comes in, that interface. Enterprise want some solutions which research can provide. And also you need that discussion piece. What are the next big movements in the next 10 years? Who's looking ahead 15 years and saying 20, this is the way the world will be, and we need to be aligning our businesses, companies, developing products that meet those needs. And that R&D piece is very, very important. But it's a broad R&D, and the definition of R&D is broad. Because I think early on when we were developing the R&D grants for small to medium-sized companies, there was still this perception, first of all, they're too difficult to apply for, and they're very hard to access, but also it's about people in white coats, and sure, I just want to get on with my business and get things done. And there was that difficulty in convincing people of the merit of this. So to me, Convene is just where we should be.
We've seen what the people in the white coats can do over the last 18 months. And again, yesterday with the new malaria vaccine. But there's still a big cry out for a lot more funding to go into research.
There is, and I would have been involved in education in the PRTLI programme and so on. And I would be one of the reasons that the new department is there to try and create a stronger focus around the cabinet table on this. We have two pieces of work to do in third level. One is the Cassell's report, and the second is research, and have substantially increased funding allocated to research, to pure research, to basic research, but also to applied research, and to this area, and I think that will come.
Now, one of the other things that you were pushing for was the establishment of the new department for higher education. A year and a half in, how's it going?
I think it's going well. I think COVID has impacted on its sort of journey. I mean, in the first year, dramatic focus on skills and the further education sector, higher education. So in the July stimulus last year, there was substantial funding put behind the fourth and third level sectors in terms of the skills agenda. And there's now a strategy being prepared on research. And so I think it's going well, actually. And I think, it's a lively department. It's nimble, and its presence at the cabinet table is very, very regular in terms of memos, in terms of new initiatives and so on. So it is working because it's an exclusive focus on the further and higher education sector. And it took us all a while to get to this space. I was at a forum about 2 years ago, I'd say now, with third level colleges, that we kind of floated the idea of a separate department, and the response from the sector was very positive and supportive of that. Because there was always a sense in the third level sector that which I would have resisted in an earlier period, that because I loved third level anyway as education minister, but I was listening a lot to the thing that they felt that primary and secondary always dominated the thinking of the Department of Education. And if we're serious, like Convene reflects where we're going in the future. So if we're serious about our future, it is actually in improving, expanding the quality of what we do in third level and fourth level. That's our guarantee for competitiveness into the future. No doubt about that.
Well, when we come then to the whole climate change and the problems that are facing us there, in one sense, are we not putting too much emphasis on third level, fourth level? Are we not putting too much pressure on our kids to get into colleges and stuff, where in the next few years, a lot of the jobs, a lot of the skills that are going to be needed are more manual?
Well, with the National Qualifications Framework model, which is now 15, 20 years in operation, actually we've broadened out the range of access points for students to do a whole range of things. I think we need to improve on that by saying to the students at the end of second level, look, there's a whole menu there, and there's a whole set of different routes to getting a degree or a postgraduate degree, or if you don't want to, you can, I mean, in fairness to this, the new department has been very strong on apprenticeships, and actually has pioneered a new approach to apprenticeships in terms of incentives to employers to take on apprenticeships, and will be, the aim is to have 10,000 a year. So you're correct that balance needs to be arrived at. But what I'm saying is basically you can go into further education, you can get qualifications that qualify you for the workplace, but you also have a qualification that enables you to do more while at work to improve your qualifications. So we have to get a sense of it. It is a lifelong affair in terms of education, but it's also there's various steps along the way. I think that model, the National Qualifications Framework, is been the most radical velvet revolution that's happened in education in 25 years. Because what it really does is it puts the student at the centre as opposed to institutions at the centre. There's an obligation on institutions, and they need to work hard at this, to move to that too, to say, like, it is about the student. And historically, 30 years ago, the demarcation lines between institutions were terrible. There wasn't that free flow between institutions. There was a snobbery there. And that's moving. I think there's a much greater openness now in third level to the idea that a person can come in with qualifications from a different sector. We can accredit that. That's what the framework does, and say you can move on to another level. And colleges are facilitating that. And I think Convene is doing that as well, in terms of, I think one of the ideas with Convene, I understand, is to simply say to companies and to institutions, we'll help you design your courses to suit your needs in the sector. I can recall when I became Minister for Education, one of the first persons I met was the CEO of Intel, Frank Micheál, actually. And he said to me, it's my first time in the Department of Education. I said, God, that's weird, that this major company, and they haven't been in the Department of Education. But anyway, technicians was the major problem. So we got the president of TUI Dundalk, IT at the time, to chair a forum, and they developed a program for 18 months. The companies came up and said, we'll give 6 months placement. We need technicians urgently. It came from the ranks of long-term unemployed. They did a year in college with a guaranteed placement of 6 months. That was a crude intervention we had to take at the time. I get the sense Convene is going to do that in a more systemic way.
And there's a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience. It's a big day today in terms of corporation tax. Is it a done deal at this stage?
Not necessarily a big day for the entrepreneurs. What I mean by that is
the
that...
decision.
No, but it'll hit the cabinets later. So basically, the OECD consensus right now is larger companies over 750. So the vast majority of SMEs will not be impacted by measures if government takes a particular decision today. We're part of the OECD process. But as I said in the Dáil 2 or 3 weeks ago, we've got to stand back to, and membership of the European Union, investment in education are the more enduring competitive advantage. And the tax has been important. And where this levels out, I don't think will impair our competitiveness. And I think the changes that we sought and that have been committed to are now in the new text give a certainty and continuity. That's very important, because most companies that have located in Ireland have said to us they want certainty and they want continuity. They don't want every 2 years changes, because that affects their planning horizon and the plans that they have to make. I think the balance is about right. As I say, where we have to move, and again, I think we've more to do in the country on our own indigenous entrepreneurial base, and that's why Convene is important and other initiatives like this, because I still think we need to learn the art of growing our SMEs to mid-sized companies without they necessarily all being sold off early on. And no, the selling off is not a bad thing in itself, because that creates a dynamic and so on. And I'm just simply saying that we need to concentrate on growing our companies into global forces, and some are doing that. And so it's a changing environment. Economy evolves, policies evolve. That's what you're witnessing now in the context of the OECD global approach to this.
Now, a lot of the businesses, though, have suffered hugely during COVID, which we've already mentioned. Is government going to continue looking ahead to the?
Yes, I think the most effective supports during COVID has been EWIS and Brid and those various employment supports to companies. The objective being to keep companies intact, to keep them viable during the COVID period. The big judgment call for government is when we change and evolve those support schemes. And our approach will be to do that gradually, to make sure that we don't do the cliff edge too early, so that you have sustainability over the next while, and early into next year as well, so that you try and keep things intact. We've watched, we take advice from the European Central Bank. Christine Lagarde has been very consistent on this in terms of our macroeconomic approach to this, that it's very important that we land this properly, and that you kind of move out of the heavy supports, but do on a gradual basis. That doesn't pull the rug out from anybody. Bounce back loans.
Bounce back loans.
Yeah, they sound very good loans.
Yeah. It's written down here in front of me.
I know, that's fine, but I just get my head around it. I think there's a number of credit lines there, so we're open to any initiatives around. Because in some of the credit lines we made available, they haven't actually been taken up. So there's lessons there for us as well in terms of, are there suitable loan sort of facilities and schemes? Are there better ways of doing it? But we're open to that. Now that we've come this far through COVID, the economy is bouncing back, but there are capacity constraints that we're kind of worried about. There's what the ECB will say is a short-term inflationary cycle or spiral at the moment. But we've got to watch that, because we're looking at very substantial capital funding. But for a lot of businesses, like the pipeline is strong in terms of the economy. We've got to watch the COVID supply chains. And the other concern I'd have is Brexit still. I think Brexit has been masked by COVID. Now it's having a bigger impact in the UK, perhaps, than has been articulated to date. So far, I think Ireland is proving itself nimble. I think we've prepared well for Brexit, to be fair. I was on a Rosslare last Friday. The port there, we've got some good illustrations of what's happening. Irish business is moving and nimble in terms of sourcing materials in the continent now. But we've got to watch it in terms of how it evolves and how Britain evolves, because Britain is still our nearest market. It's an important market.
The whole working environment, which is changing, how do you think it's going to pan out? Do you think the hybrid model, the people going back to the office, people changing what they do, people just not being prepared to do what they did before?
I think it will change. Where it land, I think, is still an open question. I think as we get more used to living post-COVID, I think there will be probably a greater graduation back to the office than we might think. But I think there will be a hybrid model. I think people will work with employers to say 3-day week, 2 days at home, 3 at work, or vice versa, depending on the companies, depending on the sectors. I think we've got to. This is a learning process. This is something Convene can help on, because it's not all about science and R&D. It's also about working through soft skills and so on. So collaboration matters. Mentoring matters. The last 2 years of graduates who've come out of college, some of them have not been in an office. They haven't met people around the table, around the coffee. scenario, that's where ideas happen, where people of different disciplines meet. So I think all that has to happen before we settle on a model that works. So I think there's a bit more experimentation to happen, and what works for us, and companies will have to make up their mind in relation to that over time. And it's also due to your skills requirements and your skill sets. And this may be an opportunity to say we can actually use skill sets that we previously might have lost because we said they're not in the workplace, they can't participate in that kind of conventional work model, and therefore we lost people who went back home, if you like, or did other things. No, you should be saying to yourself, well, actually, I don't have to lose that person. I can use that person for the benefit of the company or the organisation a bit better.
Getting the wind up from the corner over there. So the final one, have you spoken to James O'Connor yet?
Oh, Eileen has ever the news home. I have. I spoke to James last evening, but not today. We're meeting later today. It'll be after the cabinet today. So,
it's a big and busy day. It's a big and busy time. Taoiseach, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much indeed.
So good morning again, and now it's time to introduce our panel for a discussion on strengthening the partnership between higher education and enterprise in a post-pandemic Ireland. So if I start up here, we have Brid Horan, who is the Chancellor of Dublin City University. She's also Chair of Nephin Energy, Chair of the Irish Cancer Society, and in June 2014 she was appointed by the Minister for Education to the expert group to examine funding options for higher education, and she has spent much of her career at the ESB. Then another ESB man here beside me is Jerry O'Sullivan, Deputy Chief Executive since October 2014. Prior to that, he was Managing Director of ESB Networks. He's been there for 40 years. I'm just seeing that because I have a similar situation myself. He holds a degree in civil engineering from UCC and is a Fellow of Engineers Ireland and a member of the UCD Energy Institute Advisory Board. So then on this side, I have Dr. Andrea Johnson. She's Chair of the Executive Committee of WITS, Women in Technology and Science, is it?
It is.
She's a passionate advocate of women in technology, and just having a few words with her earlier, I can already vouch for that. And it's an early adopter which aims to provide teenage girls with the opportunity to gain hands-on STEM. So that's science, technology, engineering, maths, all those things that traditionally the girls didn't do. And she describes herself on LinkedIn as a thought leader and a disruptor. So we'll be hearing lots for her in a few moments, I'm quite sure. And finally, we have Micheál Horgan. Hi, Micheál.
Hey.
Chief of the HEA, the Higher Education Authority, since 2016. He's also outgoing Chairman of the Health and Safety Authority and a former Chief Executive of the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. So I might just start with you as I'm down there. Convene. What does it mean to you? What does it look like to you? What would you be hoping? I'm going to ask you all the same thing. What would you be hoping for from it?
Well, coming from the HEA has been deeply involved in this, in the development. We would hope that it will develop into, first of all, a partnership between the two universities in the future direction of where they're going. But in terms of actually getting things done, what we hope is that it will make it not just much easier, but completely seamless, the link between enterprise and the universities. And hopefully we'll come up with a number of ways that can be done, because at the moment there are lots of barriers in the way. There are lots of cultural issues in the way on both sides, more than likely. And it's an area that has been criticised a lot by industry of not being able to get access to higher education or further education. And so our hope would be that that will remove those barriers and that there'll be a seamless link between enterprise and universities, which, if I switch from the HEA position to just my own view, is that this is essential for the existence of universities in the future. I think if they don't do this, they won't exist in, I'm not sure how long, but certainly within 50 years, they won't exist.
Andrea?
I'd love to pick on that point from Micheál, because I think these are no longer nice to haves, the cherry on the cake. This has to be mainstreamed as a strategic pillar going forward. And I think the thing that really excites me about Convene is when I think about industry academic sort of partnerships in the past, in my head, it's, you know, this monolith of an academic institution, some sort of multinational, they're looking for some sort of pipeline, and obviously there's some sort of, you know, bursary or something coming back. Convene is not that. So it's way more agile, a lot more nuanced, and really focusing in on some of the challenges that we're seeing today in that labour force. So the HEA did a brilliant study, thank you, Micheál, last month on, and obviously they surveyed adults and said, you know, what are you thinking about in terms of upskilling and reskilling? And over half, well over half, it was sort of, you know, high 50% were saying, yep, looking to reskill or upskill into a more evolving sector post-pandemic. So we have half of our population say with this in our mind. And then within the workplace, we have 4 out of 10 employees thinking, yeah, I'm on the move within the next 12 months. So we've got this huge churn. And I think with that comes an opportunity to really look and examine anything that we've done within the pandemic to try and reimagine and sort of envisage what those access points are into these evolving sectors. Obviously, I'm thinking about STEM when I talk about this. And what are those different access points? And how can we drive more diversity into that? And I think that's the piece that really excites me about Convene, that they're going to be the honest brokers in this. That it's obviously academic institutions and industry, but you have social enterprise partners like WITS in the mix there. You have obviously state and semi-state authorities, but you also have, let's not forget, the humans. So, you know, the people who are actually looking for those new access pathways in, who are trying to sort of find their route and their path, they are at the centre of this piece. And I think that's what really excites me about Convene and the promise of Convene, that, you know, even for the initial work that I know they've done, and I'm going to call out Professor Anne Green over there, we've been doing some work in pharma. And, you know, there's lots of women in pharma, and they're on the bench and they're in the lab and they're phenomenal. But they will not go forward into senior leadership positions. So with IBEC, we asked, well, why? What's the story? What's the problem? And the idea of digital transformation scares the bejesus out of them. So they're really happy on the bench, they're great in the lab, they're brilliant people leaders, but they won't go into that digital transformation roles. So actually one of the things that Professor Green and IBEC and Convene are now looking at is what can we do to actually really start to engage with these women and get them off the bench, off into the labs and into these more senior roles. So these aren't makey-uppy problems. These are real world problems that we're tackling today. And I think that's the excitement of Convene right there.
Terry.
Right. Well, for me, it's a very welcome advancement in what we have already. And I suppose for my sins, in ESB, innovation and research and development reports to me as well. As you said, I'm a long time around. So if I can be controversial for a moment, first of all, our purpose in our company is to lead and deliver the transition to a low carbon future, net zero. And as you know, the solutions for that, the market models for that, the technologies for that are not all known. So we absolutely need universities and research and to be collaborating. But in the past, I would have to say it was quite difficult to get collaborations going with universities, plural. They worked as individuals. They often competed with each other. Now, that has changed in recent years. And just to give you some examples, you know, as you say, I'm involved with UCD. And we have a project there called Nexus, which is a successor to another project called ESIP, forgive all the jargon, which has all the universities on the island working together, bringing all their particular expertises in a collaborative way, working with us and other industry partners. And that has been a phenomenal experience. And it covers the full range, not just the technology, the innovation, but the people, the development. We work with UCC the same way we work with here in terms of diversity and inclusion. I think the universities have a big role to play. And what Convene means to me is a realisation that we need to be working together in collaboration, not in isolation, on common problems. And today, I just wanted to talk about, build on the one that Micheál Martin mentioned, the Taoiseach. Energy, as I would, is huge for us all. And we're seeking to make sure that we can all work together on that and almost learn from the pandemic, because we worked well as a country together. If we look at our vaccination rates, if we can, the biggest challenge for us all in the world is climate. Can we now reach out and get the citizens involved? Because smart and all as we can be here with technologies, if we don't get that broader engagement, which we did in COVID, a common cause, we won't succeed. So when I look at universities, people think I talk technology and business models. It's as much about engaging with people and the human sciences. And if you look at our company, in the past we had 900 engineers, 400 accountants. Look at us now. We have behavioural scientists. We have all of those skills, because you can't succeed without that breadth. So universities have a challenge to help us to train those skills. And if I could, it's just not about the university guys. We're big into apprenticeships, but then you train at work for those people to become higher skilled. And I think that's a very nice new advancement as well, that universities are helping us to do that, to credit our people to be better as they develop. You know, and I think it's an exciting move. It's really, really where we need to be.
Great. Thanks, Eileen. Listening to everybody, the first emotion I have around Convene is, oh my God, thank goodness, having been on the Castles group, because one of the recommendations from the Castles group, which was implemented, and I could talk a lot more about the ones that haven't quite been implemented, and I wish the Taoiseach was here, I would like to. Sorry, that's me. But we did recommend an increase in the National Training Levy, and that is the fund that is being used now for the Human Capital Initiative, this pillar 3 of it. 197 million across 22 projects. I think it's fantastic, because we were very keen on a number of things. One was collaboration among the institutions. Like, the sector has to become a genuine sector, and we would also have emphasised that in some work that I did, that I chaired for the HEA subsequent to Castles. But that collaboration has to work effectively, and it's great. For example, there's a programme being undertaken now by the IUA, the Irish University Association, across all the university campuses on the management of waste, you know, which is kind of an unglamorous aspect of sustainability and the circular economy, but a really important one. So to actually develop expertise in that and to see the universities collaborating on that, I think is wonderful. But also the engagement with enterprise. And one of the problems that we observed, both in Castles and the work that we did a lot of consultation with enterprise and with the public sector, by the way, and with SMEs. There's a real problem. You know, ESB, saving your presence, Jerry, has no problem. Any university will open the door for you, and you know where the doors are. It's much more difficult for SMEs and smaller not-for-profits, or indeed smaller initiatives across government bodies or public service bodies. So actually really focusing on this through Convene, I think, is a really important element. And I suppose some of the other projects that are under this Human Capital Initiative pillar include, for example, one with the Irish University Association, again, which will involve all universities, on micro-credentials. And that comes back to the points that Andrea was making there about people reinventing themselves and lifelong learning. So companies like ESB and other companies that I'm involved with do fantastic in-house training, but actually people no longer are satisfied just to have in-house training. They want to actually be able to put an accreditation with that and to be able to stack it. And that's one of the things that we're also working on in DCU, actually, not just in Ireland, but at European level. The European Consortium of Innovative Universities are working on building credentials across the whole of Europe, which I think is really the future as we look at the workforce. But there's a lot still to be done. And just one disappointment I have about the Human Capital Initiative is that it excluded teacher training. Now, I've had direct experience in working with DCU, Accenture and the 30% Club, another of my passions, to develop a STEM internship for trainee teachers, because teachers may not work in the private sector, but their students will work in the private sector. And it's really important that those teachers, second level certainly, and ultimately primary, have a better understanding of the needs of enterprise and of the opportunities that are available to their students in the future. So I think there's a huge amount of work that can be done really effectively. So we started with Accenture, but it's now broadened out across all kinds of companies, bringing trainee teachers in for a summer to actually work, paid work in the company, learning about the possibilities. And then the other program that DCU is leading on is DCU Futures, which is around the actual curriculum and the teaching of our undergraduates to look at making that fit for future, digital enabling right across all kind of faculties and areas, but also adaptability and that employability piece, which is also supported, of course, by the placement programs. So DCU has kind of in its DNA that engagement with enterprise, but it's one thing to say it's in your DNA, it's another thing to really make it accessible to enterprise and to other organisations.
And what, if anything, has the pandemic taught us in all of this? I mean, Jerry, you touched on, you know, as a community, the collaboration, but in terms of your work now going forward, all of you, what is it teaching us?
Sorry, are you asking me?
Yeah. In general, whoever wants to take it up.
Happy to jump in.
Well, maybe just to pick it up from a business, and again, building what the Taoiseach said. So we, in our staff, we survey our staff. We have 8,000 staff every 6 weeks on how they feel about work and their health and well-being and so on.
I'm writing that down.
Yeah, and just to share a bit of research for you, so 6% of our people want to be at home all the time now. 8% want to be at the office all the time. The balance want hybrid. So we were trying to move in that direction long before the pandemic. I don't call it remote working, I call it smart working, where you have a purpose-led organisation, you value people's contribution and you measure outputs, you don't measure presenteeism. So we were trying to go that way, and I'm reluctant to say there's anything good about COVID. But in 2 days, we had 4,000 people working from home, and they still are. We haven't had a board meeting in ESB in person since. We have 160 companies across the world. We operate all of them and can do the way we are. So we're not going back to where we came. So there's all the positives that people wanted, and we can be very efficient. The piece where I would love a bit of research to be done in universities and so on, and the Taoiseach touched on it, our absenteeism is down by a quarter, but now the biggest cause of absenteeism is stress and well-being. So there are considerable issues about remote working, the divide between work and home, and all of those issues. And I think we need to iterate, and we need to do a fair piece of research about what are those impacts as well, because they're not all positive. So our vision certainly is that you go to the office for collaboration and for social and other bits. You don't go to do work that you can do at home. But if we don't do enough on that social side, our well-being issues will go. And I think we just need to all research that human dimension. I think the Taoiseach mentioned it. There'll be an iteration here. But I'm just sharing you our view where we are going to. Yeah. And it has transformed our business because we had become too Dublin-centric. I would say that as a Corkman, wouldn't I? Right. Yeah. But we had, and we were effectively telling our people that if they weren't Dublin, that they wouldn't be senior people in ESB in all kinds of ways. That's all changed now. And we had to for another reason, because life-work balance is what people want now. They want to live in rural. They want to have broadband through our SIRE or whatever they were doing. And we wouldn't be able to retain talent in the old model. We feel we can now by having a purpose-led company, that you're working for a company that has a higher level purpose than just your pay. And secondly, that you can have a life-work balance and live in places where you and your family are happy. And we're good with that.
I wonder, is it affecting efficiency? I was talking to my sister in America last night, and she said Facebook now are blaming the whole meltdown on the fact that there were so many people out, away, off-site, that it couldn't be sorted quicker, and that they're going to pull more people back in now, having said they wouldn't bring anyone back until next year.
We haven't found so far. And remember now, our definition of smart working is not remote working. It is trusting your people and having performance management systems that speaks to the output and that you have regular, we had that anyway. It's very early days, we have not noticed any drop off in productivity. In fact, our engagement scores are up 8-10%. Our people seem happier. Our results, if you want to go that way, are as good as ever. So, but there's research to be done on that in universities and other things over time. I think it's too early to cast an absolute vote on it, you know.
Michael, you were going to come in there. Sorry, Brid, I'll come back to you.
No, the comments that Jerry has said from the ESB point of view are actually critical, because to me, that's one of the key things. It's how the culture of the organisation is changing to adapt to what's new. It's not that the organisation is saying our culture is this and you have to comply with it. It's actually beginning to move, that the employees are beginning to change the culture because of the behaviour of what's happened. In preparing for today, I came across a very recent survey that McKinsey's have done on work and the nature of work. And it shows that since April of this year, 15 million US workers have quit their jobs. And that's the fastest pace ever of people leaving work. And most of the responses were because they had realized there was something different. There was something different they could do. There was a different way of doing it. And if you look around, it struck me, I walked in town, my wife and myself on Sunday walked around town, the number of restaurants with ads outside looking for different chefs and kitchen porters and so on. Practically every single one had that out. And more we're hearing of the hospitality sector having problems. It's going. But from this research, which was done in Australia, Canada, Singapore, US and the UK, that trend is continuing. So if that's the case, there's a big wave coming towards us that Convene are going to be ideally positioned to do the research into, to find out what it is what the nature of work, if you like, what that's going to be. And I see that as a huge opportunity for Convene. Now, there are other third level issues, because third level will almost certainly be dealing with that issue themselves also internally as organizations, but they're also dealing with the wave of change of how teaching is delivered, which you know, in practically 2 years changed what had been stopped for 20 years. And that's another bigger channel. So poor Convene is going to be dealing with an internal issue and external issues at the same time. Yeah. But they're well up to it.
Yeah. That's actually one of the points that I wanted to come in on, Eileen. Just in the same way as ESB and other organisations that I deal with have been dealing with remote working or smart working, flexible, call it what you like, it's definitely been changed. The higher level institutions have been dealing with the same issues, and the staff have been under the same pressures. They adapted overnight, over a weekend certainly. But it's interesting to look, the Irish Universities Association did some research here with students, and actually there was also research done, I think by NUIG, with workers, and the 40% number is kind of there for the workers in terms of people are thinking that they want to change their job. Now, I'm not sure how that'll work out in practice. I think employers are going to have to be very agile to actually balance what people want in their lives, but also what organisations need, and this is true of the higher level sector as well. People coming together, there is no doubt that collaboration, innovation happens best when people are together. Like, there's a limit to what you can achieve on screen, there's no doubt about that. And the Taoiseach mentioned mentoring, for example. You can do a certain amount of that over the screen. It's much harder if you're establishing new relationships, integrating people into the organisation, whether it's a safety culture or a quality culture or customer service. Like, we all learned by watching somebody else on the phone with a difficult customer. I know in my own experience, 50 years ago, Jerry, and not an ESB. So this month I'm celebrating 50 years in the workforce, which is that's really mind-boggling, Jerry. I'll talk to you about it in 10 years' time and see how you're doing. But in higher education as well, that research among students was really interesting, because we all know they've been dying to get back on campus. But actually, they want a new form of experience, both on campus. They want a new form of experience for learning. They have benefited from the online. They've suffered from it. You know, at one level, we all understand that. Who wants to be a student sitting at their parents' kitchen table or up in their bedroom? That wasn't exactly what they signed up for. But on the other hand, they want flexibility. They want even the flexibility to watch lectures on campus online. They want the flexibility to be able to learn online perhaps, but be able to meet their peers, be able to have a face-to-face conversation with their lecturers. They want new forms of assessment. So the whole system right through is in flux. And I agree with you, Jerry. I think there's a real collaboration to be had between enterprise and higher education and the public system as to how we're going to figure this out. And I think it's going to be a period, quite a rocky period. You can see it in the States in particular. There are a lot of companies calling their workers back in, and that kind of control mechanism is coming back into place. But I think one of the key strengths in Irish enterprise, and I've seen this right back to, I served 10 years on the board of the IDA and met a lot of companies, and tax was important, of course it was important, but the quality of our graduates was really important. And the other thing that was mentioned to me very commonly was the quality of Irish management, the agility, the ability to manage change. And I think that's going to be a key factor. Companies will need to upskill managers and to support them so that we don't have the mental and social difficulties that are certainly lurking there in the background at the moment.
Just to add to that, to confirm it, that I suppose the biggest challenge we've seen is our graduates in the past 2 years, that bringing those into the company.
Without bringing them into the office.
And they're not able to meet the guys, and we all learned because managers took a bit of time to say it, and we missed that and they missed that. If you're in the company a long time, you can kind of have all the networks, but if you're coming in new, it's a real challenge, and it's one of our worries, because those guys really need to be touching and seeing and, you know, the culture of the place. Can't really do that all the time on Teams calls.
Last word to you, because I'm getting back over there.
I think when we think about the pandemic, one of the pieces that I'm really hoping that is we don't lose. I would have said to you 2 years ago, in 2 years' time, Eileen, we're going to have hybrid and flexible working in most organisations. You would have said, what are you drinking, love? I'll have one of them. Do you know what I mean? It just was not on the card. So I don't want I don't want to step back from that. And I think we've got to kick on from it. I think we know that the pandemic has overly impacted women. And so we really do need to make sure that we keep that flexibility as we go through this rocky patch.
Tell them what you were telling me before we came on about the uptake in women upskilling.
So the Women Returners programme, the SkillsNet programme, used to be an in-person programme, and they always had really healthy waiting lists. But obviously with the pandemic, they had to flip that into a virtual offering. And we just seen the numbers just going through the roof, and we were delighted. So when they started to dig into it, Zoom was obviously one of the pieces, but the second piece was their partners had been offered flexibility. So the chaps could then suss the kids out, pick-ups, everything else, and all of a sudden then they were available then to do this, 12-week course. And the numbers have gone through the roof. So actually the flexibility, it's not about flexibility for women, it's flexibility full stop. Drives all these, very different access points and the potential there. So we're really excited about that, and long may it last. But I think we've got to keep hold of it now. We can't go backwards. And we're seeing this in the States.
Well,
just on that point, one of my sons, he and his wife had a baby in June 19 and then a second baby in August this year. And he is dreading the return to the office. he's been working really effectively from home, but he's also saying that he dreads not being there in the morning and evening for the children. So he's working online all day, but how do you go back to not seeing your children? I think that's a really new model. I talked to a colleague of my own kind of generation, a male colleague, when Joe had kind of qualms about going back after paternity leave after 2 weeks, and the male colleague on a board was kind of, imagine being at home for, with my children. And the same man would be all enthusiastic about his grandchildren. But these young fathers have now sampled real fatherhood, real presence. So I agree with you, let's not go back. But yet we have to find a model that works all around, that manages that development, that collaboration, that risk management, all of that. But let's not go back.
Well, thank you all. Interesting and challenging times ahead. Micheál, Andrea, Jerry and Brid, thank you all for joining us here this morning. And fair sailing to Convene. We'll be watching out and keeping tabs as it all moves forward, and congratulations all for getting it this far. Thank you.
First of all, I'm Susie Jarvis. I'm the founding director of the UCD Innovation Academy, and it's a real pleasure to be partnering with TU Dublin for Convene. So first of all, it falls to me to close the event today, and please excuse me if I mess it up, because I haven't been getting out much recently. So really, innovation and agility is all about looking forward, envisioning that future and creating it. And I think we've heard some really good thought-provoking examples of how we might do that going forward. But just before we end, I wanted to pause for a minute and just look back and see how far we've come. So to do that, I wanted to share a memory I have of earlier this year, and I want to see if anybody else has a similar memory. Okay? So my memory is of Deirdre Lillis on Zoom at the beginning of the year, or it might have been Teams, sorry, it might have been Teams, and she had her head in her hand like this, and she said, "It is the 71st of January today." And I just want to ask, how many people here remember the 71st of January? Come on, raise your hands for me if you remember the 71st of January this year. Yeah. So most of us remember the 71st of January. And that's really important. That's really important because it's these collective memories of a shared human experience that bind us together. And it's particularly important for Convene, because look at the diversity that we have in the room today. We have enterprise from 7 different sectors. We have academics. We have public servants, civil servants, entrepreneurs. If we'd convened 2 years ago, it would have been really, really difficult to find something in common, something that brought us all together. And more than that, most of us in the room have led through the pandemic. We've had to make really, really complex decisions with unparalleled ambiguity and uncertainty. Imagine David trying to pull together a new university, a new campus during the pandemic. Imagine Vivian and her team trying to launch this new initiative and keep it going so that we could all be here today during the pandemic. But my point is, we can imagine now, can't we? We can imagine, because we've walked those 5 kilometres together in each other's shoes. We've been in each other's attic rooms and each other's garage extensions, and we've smiled fondly at each other's children and pets, even though we probably haven't done that enough of our own. So this really brings us on this common purpose. And it means that now we can imagine, and we empathise with each other, and we understand each other better than we have before. And We know each other now. We see each other now. And Convene is going to hold on to that. Convene is going to build on that. So we all work together more closely than we ever have done before to solve the problems that we have today and tomorrow and into the future. And it's really a pleasure to have you all here today. Thank you for coming. It's great to see everybody. And we really look forward to talking about our work together over some refreshments. And remember, if you don't have a talking point, 71st of January. Thank you very much.